Hello again, and welcome to part 4 of That Makes Sense. So in this section, we're going to be focusing on sensory needs and how they can affect our anxiety. We're going to be thinking about how we keep our body in balance when we've got sensory differences. And we're going to be talking about things like our activity levels, self-regulations, and we're going to be introducing a tool called the sensory ladder tool that can help children to track how their body's feeling. We're going to talk a little bit as well about managing difficult times and some sensory strategies that can help with this. So to talk a little bit now about the link between sensory sensitivity and anxiety, we've already mentioned a few times how the senses play a big role in our survival instinct. We need them to warn us about danger or threat. And what our body does when it's in these difficult situations, it responds with something called a fight, flight or freeze response. That helps us to face dangerous situations. So we can either fight back, if that's a feasible option, we can run away, or we can freeze, which would be a bit like an animal playing dead, so that a potential attacker loses interest and moves away. So these are the sort of responses that we quite often get with children who have too much sensory information. They'll either fight, flight or freeze. So children who tend to lash out, if it all gets a bit much, they're in fight. Children who tend to run away from situations are in flight, and children who tend to go into more of a shutdown are in freeze. And just everyday situations can trigger this quite full-on survival response for children who over-respond to sensory. The other thing that can happen as well is that the emotional part of our brain can quite often tag if we have a traumatic event. The emotional brain can tag some of the sensory features of this event, which can cause a panic response to happen whenever we're in that same experience and we experience that sensation again. So for people who don't have the additional sensory needs, it could be being in a car accident. So if you had a nasty car accident and then you experience some of the same sensations around that, you might then go into a panic. But for some sensory children, this might just be something like having a haircut, because that's so traumatic for a lot of children who struggle with touch. And then as soon as they even see the hair clippers or the salon, they're already in that panic fear response and they're already having a meltdown before anything's even happened. And the other thing just to be aware of as well is, obviously, if children panic a lot, at this ongoing panic response can be quite detrimental to things like sleep, and it can also have a long-term negative impact on health, just because of the chemicals that get released into the bloodstream at times of stress. So if there's things that we can do to reduce some of the sensory triggers and help prevent this panic response from happening, it's something that's really valuable. So just want to talk a little bit now about keeping the body in balance. So the autonomic nervous system, again, let's not read too much about the terminology here, but this is the bit of the system that is responsible for keeping the body in balance, and it helps us to balance the fight or flight freeze response that we were talking about against our calming response, which is our rest and digest state. So it helps to, when we get into a fight or flight situation and we get panicky, we then need the other side of the ANS to kick in so we can have the rest and digest, and that's going to restore the body back to a resting state. So a lot of the sensory, the reason that I'm bringing this up here is because a lot of the things that we would suggest for sensory over responsiveness tap into this rest and digest system. So things like deep pressure and the heavy muscle work both tap in and encourage the rest and digest function, which is how we can then overcome some of the anxiety and the panic that we get from the sensory sensitivity. So some of the calming and organising things that we can do to help the body get back to that rest and digest, things like the heavy muscle work that we've talked about, deep pressure. The other thing that can be helpful as well is rhythmic rocking, so that would be like lying over a peanut ball or a gym ball and rocking slowly, but use with caution. Some children will find that really calming and others won't at all. And for some people, it might be that I might need to spend a bit of time in a low stimulus space, so something like a dark den or a little, small regrouping space. There's other things that work for certain children, but not everybody. So for some children, having being stroked or sort of gently massaged, really helpful for some people, but for others not at all. For some people, might like listening to calming music or watching sort of calming visualizer or something like that. But these ones on the slide are the things that are more general strategies, and other things are going to be more sort of unique and individual to the person. So again, it's just exploring what works well, and it's always good to try some of these things when you're calm to see whether they're helpful for you before trying them when somebody's in a not calm state and they need calming down. So the other thing to be really aware of here is that sometimes some of the things that we do have a bit of what's called a carryover effect. So if we're doing heavy muscle work, not only does it help to calm and bring us back down to rest and digest, but the positive effect of that lasts for some time afterwards as well. So this is why sometimes we suggest that people do things at certain points throughout the day. So particularly say if somebody struggles to cope in class, they might need to do some exercises at the beginning of the session, and then they'll probably get about an hour where they're still feeling the benefits of that. They'll need to do a little bit more, and again have time where they feel the benefits, and so on. So if we watch this video clip now, and we'll just introduce a few more strategies that you can try. So I want to talk a little bit at this stage about something called self-regulation. This is something that you might hear being talked about in relation to sensory as well. So basically, the term sensory regulation is used to describe people's ability to control their emotions, their activity levels, so how active they are, and also impulses as well. So self-regulation even needs a mix of both sensory processing skills and brain strategies as well, so we can think about what we're doing, and it also helps us to match our activity levels to the task in hand. So if we have a little think there about what self-regulated looks like. So again, the task in hand for the people on this picture is that they're doing an exam, so obviously they need to be quite alert and attending, but it's not somewhere where you can be shouting, running around, that sort of thing. So you need to be focused. When you're well regulated, what it's going to look like, you'll be really focused on what you're doing. Your body is going to appear relaxed and at ease. Energy levels quite appropriate for what's happening and the task and situations. So again, children, you'll notice their voice, it sounds appropriate, it's the right level, it's the right volume and pace for what they're doing. And again, if you've got a child who's non-verbal, their vocalizations will be similar to that as well. So when we're well regulated, we can do our best work, we can listen, we can use our higher level thinking skills as well. And what we find as well is when we're well regulated, our sensory needs have been met. So we don't need to fidget as much or make noises or do other sorts of sensory seeking things that we might do. So it helps us to get on with our work without distraction. So then on the other hand, what dysregulated might look like, and this is what we need to look out for. When I was saying before about children struggling sometimes with movement activities and it can be dysregulating, these are the sorts of things to look out for, which would show you that that activity isn't very helpful for your child. So we were looking for things like a change in energy level. So they might suddenly become very active, they might seem super energized, really restless. And again, we'd notice a change in their voice quality or their vocalizations. So it'd be much louder, the pitch would go much higher, they'd be faster, and sometimes we might see some body changes as well. So these are the sorts of things to look out for. If you're doing movement like swinging, which can be really over alerting for some children. So you might see things like their skin flushing or going pale, they might start sweating, their body might appear tense, you might see some changes to their eyes, the pupils dilating, their muscles going stiff, that sort of thing. And again, we'd notice some changes in their behaviour as well. So they wouldn't be able to listen or use their thinking skills. So they could be not able to listen and quite impulsive. And if they tend to sensory seek, those behaviours might then just go into overdrive as well. So it's useful sometimes when we're thinking about self-regulation and activity levels to think about the Winnie the Pooh characters. because these characters here, Winnie, Tigger and Eeyore, are very good at representing the three different levels. So what we want and what we're looking for with the children who we support is for them to be like Winnie the Pooh in the middle at the just right level. Quite often we've got children who are too high and bouncing all over the place, and they're the Tiggers, and children who are too low and like Eeyore will struggle to get going, maybe not be as motivated and that sort of thing. So if we look at our activity levels over the day as well, so quite often we were talking before about sensory triggers. So a sensory trigger is sort of any kind of thing that happens, a negative thing to do with any of the senses that your child would struggle with. So if you've got a child who struggles with touch, any sort of thing that involves the touch system that happens throughout the day is going to be a sensory trigger for them. So being accidentally knocked past, having to get changed for PE, somebody tapping them on the shoulder, all of those sorts of things are going to, maybe their label irritating them all throughout the day. All of these things would be a sensory trigger, and depending on what your child's sensitive to would depend on what the triggers would be. So again, a lot of children might start down, fairly low. All of these yellow boxes, these yellow triangles are indicating different sensory triggers happening through the day. So you can see we'd go from being a little bit low at the start of the day, we're just right, but all our energy levels and activity levels are going up, and then just one more big sensory trigger and we've gone too high, and bang, that's when you're going to see people are just getting into overload because they've just had too much sensation, they've got no outlet, they can't cope with it anymore, and that's when you will see a behaviour response. So I want to talk here a little bit about the sensory ladder tool, because this is something that, and again, you can download it from the website. This is something that can be used just to help children to understand their activity levels and where they are and how they're feeling. And what we usually advise as well is that these are personalised. So this one was made for somebody who really, really liked dogs. So again, it's like finding, you want to be in the green bit, in the calm and alert in the middle, but again, depending on what your child's interests are, you need to match that up. So again, it could be Minecraft, it could be Star Wars, it could be anything like that. It works better, again, if you download the tool, it does explain in it how to use it, but it does work a little bit better if children use their own language, because again, they're not going to say, oh, I'm feeling over alert, but they might feel, I'm feeling all spinny or all dizzy or all sort of busily, however they describe it, you can use their words for it. And again, the idea is that you then make a little token that you would slide up and down the ladder, and so the child could see where they were. Again, if you're starting to use these, it's sometimes useful for other people in the house to make one as well, just so that you can explain maybe why you're struggling to get going in the morning to your child. But sometimes children find it easier to see things, they find it easier to see other people doing it than they do to actually understand what they're doing themselves. So that can be helpful to try. So just to talk a little bit about managing difficult times. Again, it's a little bit hard to see on your screen, but the picture here shows something called the stress model of crisis, which basically shows what happens every time. And again, they're using the term crisis just to describe any sort of a meltdown or a time when somebody isn't coping. So there's a line at the bottom which would show what your child is like most of the time. So that is their usual behaviour. It's called, in the stress model of crisis, they call it baseline behaviours, but that's how the person usually is. And then the curve that goes up showing how they're starting to build, so into agitation, that then becomes aggression, and then at the top would be violence, where they would lash out or swear or show some sort of violence in words or actions. And I think the reason that I've wanted to flag this one up here is because if we are going to use sensory strategies to try and help people to calm, when we would need to do it would be at the first stage. So you can see there's a blue circle at the bottom, and then there's three little like suns that get more spiky as they go up. So any sort of strategies would need to be carried out while you're at that first bit, the first sun, like that agitation and maybe just into the aggression level. As soon as they've become really aggressive and really violent, it's not going to be helpful to do any sort of sensory strategies. You really need to give that person some space and some time to calm at that point. Right then, so I'm going to show you another deep pressure activity. This one is making your child into a sandwich. So again, just use what you've got at home. So we happen to have a really big beanbag, so I'm using that as the bottom bun. But again, if you've got sofa cushions that come up, if you've got big cushions, beanbags, anything like that, just use what you've got at home. So Benji, can you lie down? Right, what sandwich are you going to be today?
Well, I don't know. Probably just like a chorizo sandwich with lots of chili on.
With lots of chili. Right then, okay. So let's put the, you can be the chorizo. Let's put the topping, let's put the bread bun on you. Now then, do you need any extra toppings?
Yes.
What would you like?
I think I'm gonna need some spicy cheese.
The spicy cheese. Right then, I've got a lot of spicy cheese coming right up. Anything else?
I think also I'm gonna need a lot of jalapenos.
Some jalapenos. Here we go. Right then, what about any sauce?
Hot chili sauce.
Hot chili sauce. Are you ready? Anything else? Do we need anything else?
Yes.
What do you need now?
I think I might need some bacon.
Some bacon? Oh, I've got 2 bits of crispy bacon just here. Right, then they can go on the top of your sandwich. Okay, there we go. So the key thing with this is make sure that your child's head is out of the sandwich at all times and get them to tell you whether it's enough pressure, whether they want a bit more pressure, whether they want more toppings. Does that feel okay at the minute, Benji?
Yeah, eat me.
Right then. Okay. Go. Okay, so if either you're out and about and haven't got anything with you, or if you haven't got any large bits of kit at home that you can use for deep pressure, you can always just use yourself. So for this one, you just need to make sure that your child is either sitting or standing with a really straight back, and then you're going to put the palms of your hands just here on their shoulders, and you're just going to press down firmly but gently. So it might be good to just sort of count while you're doing it. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now Benji, you don't really like this, do you?
No.
So if your child doesn't really like it, you can always do it from the side, so they're getting a firm pressure that way.
Do you still have to sit tall for this bit?
No, it doesn't matter as much, no. But again, if I'm pressing down like that, I need you to have a really straight back, because otherwise if you're sitting with a bent back and then I press down, that might hurt your back. So that's why you need to sit tall. But it doesn't matter as much when I'm pressing at the side. The other thing you can do as well, do you want to just shuffle back a little bit and just sit between my knees? So I can also use my knees just to give you a bit of deep pressure that way. As well as this is probably a little bit better with younger children. And I say we can do this standing up as well if pressing down, but just make sure they've got a really straight back. Does that feel better from the side? Is that better for you? Yeah. So again, it's just a check with your child, see what they like, because again, if you've got somebody who's an over-responder, they'll really respond better to it if they're in control and they feel like they're being part of it as well. Okay, thank you.